The bullet tore through Emma Abbott's side just as the afternoon sun turned the Colorado mountains gold, and she knew immediately that this was how she would die. She had been riding hard along the narrow mountain pass above Georgetown when the shot rang out, echoing off the rocky cliffs like thunder. Her mare stumbled beneath her, sensing Emma's sudden inability to maintain control, and Emma felt herself sliding sideways in the saddle as warmth spread across her ribs and down her hip. The reins slipped through her fingers as another shot cracked through the air, this one splintering the bark of a pine tree just beyond her head. Bandits. She had heard the warnings in town about the gang operating in these mountain passes, preying on travelers foolish enough to ride alone. But she had been so desperate to reach her sister in Silver Plume that she had ignored every cautious voice telling her to wait. The mare bolted, and Emma clung to the saddle horn with weakening fingers, her vision already beginning to blur at the edges. She could hear hoofbeats behind her, multiple riders, and she tried to urge her horse faster, but her body was not responding the way it should. Blood soaked through her calico dress, turning the pale blue fabric dark and wet. The world tilted dangerously as her mare rounded a bend, and then Emma was falling, the ground rushing up to meet her with brutal inevitability. She hit the dirt hard, pain exploding through her side and stealing what little breath she had left. Dust filled her mouth and nose as she tried to drag herself toward the shelter of the rocks, but her arms would not support her weight. The hoofbeats were getting closer. She could hear men shouting, their voices rough and eager, and she closed her eyes against the fear that threatened to overwhelm even the pain. Her fingers dug into the rocky soil, but she managed to move perhaps a foot before her strength gave out entirely. Then different hoofbeats coming fast from the opposite direction. A single rider. Emma forced her eyes open and saw him through the haze of pain and blood loss. A cowboy on a big roan gelding, riding like the devil himself was giving chase. He had his rifle in his hands before he even reached her, and he fired off 3 shots in rapid succession toward the bandits who had been pursuing her. Emma heard shouting, heard the bandits wheeling their horses around, and then the cowboy was swinging down from his saddle and running toward her. "Easy now," he said, and his voice was deep and steady despite the fact that he had just charged into a gunfight. He dropped to his knees beside her, his hands hovering over her wound as if he was afraid to touch her and cause more damage. "Easy. I have got you." Emma tried to speak, tried to tell him to leave her and save himself, but all that came out was a choked gasp. The cowboy's face was sun-weathered and angular, with dark hair that fell across his forehead beneath his hat and eyes that were an unusual shade of hazel, more green than brown in the late afternoon light. He looked young, perhaps 25 or 26, but his hands were steady and sure as he pressed his neckerchief against her side. "You are losing too much blood," he said, more to himself than to her. He looked up the trail toward Georgetown, then back down at her wound, and she saw him make a decision. Without another word, he slid his arms beneath her and lifted her as carefully as if she were made of glass. Emma cried out despite herself as the movement sent fresh agony tearing through her side, and she felt more blood welling up, soaking through the makeshift bandage and onto the cowboy's shirt. "I am sorry," he said, and she could hear genuine anguish in his voice. "I am sorry, but I have to get you to the doctor. Just hold on." He carried her to his horse and somehow managed to mount while still holding her cradled against his chest. Emma's head lolled against his shoulder, and she could smell leather and sage and honest sweat. The world was fading in and out now, everything becoming soft and distant except for the terrible burning in her side and the steady thud of the cowboy's heart against her ear. "Stay with me," he said, his arm tightening around her as he urged his horse into a gallop. "Do you hear me? Stay with me." Emma wanted to obey. She wanted to stay conscious and thank him for saving her life, wanted to tell him her name and learn his, wanted to do anything except slip away into the darkness that was pulling at her with such insistence. But her body had other plans. She felt herself going limp in his arms, felt her breathing becoming shallow and labored, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The ride back to Georgetown was a blur of pain and motion. She was only dimly aware of the horse's jarring gait, of the cowboy's voice continuing to speak to her even though she could no longer make out the words, of the way he held her so carefully despite the urgency of their flight. At some point she heard him shouting, heard other voices responding, and then they were slowing and she felt herself being jostled as he dismounted. "Where is Doc Brennan?" The cowboy was shouting. "Somebody get Doc Brennan." Emma forced her eyes open for just a moment and saw buildings around them, saw people running toward them with alarmed expressions. The cowboy was carrying her again, moving fast through a doorway and into a dim interior that smelled of carbolic and tobacco. He laid her down on something soft, and she wanted to protest because his arms had felt safe and now she was cold without them. "Doc!" The cowboy's voice was ragged now, desperate. She heard footsteps, heard an older man's voice asking what had happened, and then the cowboy was speaking again, his words tumbling over each other. "She was shot, up on the pass. Bandits. I got to her as quick as I could, but she is bleeding too much. Doc, please." An older man's face swam into view above her, weathered and kind beneath a shock of white hair. He was pulling away the blood-soaked neckerchief, examining her wound with practiced efficiency. Emma tried to focus on his face, but everything kept sliding away from her. "How long ago was she shot?" Doc Brennan was asking. "Maybe 20 minutes, the cowboy said. He was standing close enough that Emma could see him in her peripheral vision, could see the blood staining his shirt and his hands. His hat was gone, probably lost in the desperate ride down the mountain, and his dark hair was disheveled. "She has been unconscious most of the ride back." "Hurry," the cowboy said, and his voice cracked. "She is fading." Those were the last words Emma heard before the darkness finally claimed her completely. When she woke, it was to the smell of clean linens and the soft yellow light of an oil lamp. For a long moment she simply lay still, trying to remember where she was and what had happened. Her side ached with a deep, throbbing pain that made her stomach churn, but it was nothing compared to the burning agony she remembered from the mountainside. She turned her head carefully and saw that she was in a small, neat room with whitewashed walls and simple furnishings. A medical office, she realized. Doc Brennan's office. The memory of the shooting came flooding back, along with the image of the cowboy charging in to save her, firing at the bandits without hesitation. She remembered his face as he knelt beside her, remembered the gentleness of his hands despite his obvious urgency, remembered his voice telling her to hold on. She wondered where he was now, whether he had stayed or ridden on about his business once he had delivered her to the doctor. The door opened quietly and Doc Brennan entered, carrying a basin of water. He smiled when he saw her awake. "Well now," he said, setting the basin down on a small table. "I was beginning to wonder if you would sleep straight through to tomorrow. How do you feel?" "Like I was shot," Emma managed, her voice coming out as barely more than a whisper. Doc Brennan chuckled. "That is an accurate assessment. You were very lucky, Miss Abbott. The bullet went clean through without hitting anything vital, but you lost a considerable amount of blood. Another hour and I do not think I could have helped you." "The cowboy," Emma said, "the one who brought me in, is he Yates Freeman?" Doc Brennan nodded. "He is outside. Has been there for the better part of 6 hours, refusing to leave until he knew you would pull through. Stubborn as a mule, that one. Good man, though. One of the best. 6 hours. Emma felt something warm unfold in her chest, something that had nothing to do with fever. A stranger had saved her life and then waited for hours just to know that she would survive. "May I see him?" "Let me check your bandages first," Doc Brennan said. "Then if everything looks good, I will send him in. But only for a few minutes." You need rest more than anything right now. The examination was uncomfortable but mercifully brief. Doc Brennan declared himself satisfied with how the wound was closing and went to fetch Yates. Emma tried to smooth her hair and immediately regretted it as the movement pulled at her stitches. She probably looked like death warmed over, covered in bandages and pale from blood loss, but vanity seemed like a small concern compared to everything else that had happened. When Yates Freeman stepped through the door, Emma's breath caught despite the pain it caused. She had remembered him as handsome in that brief, desperate glimpse before she lost consciousness. But seeing him now in the lamplight, she realized that handsome did not quite cover it. He was tall and lean, with broad shoulders and the kind of weathered grace that came from years in the saddle. He had cleaned the blood from his hands and changed his shirt, but she could see the exhaustion in the lines around his eyes, in the way he held himself as if he had been tensed for battle and had not yet remembered how to relax. "Miss Abbott," he said, and even his voice seemed different now, softer but no less sincere. "I am glad to see you awake. Doc Brennan said you are going to be all right." "Thanks to you," Emma said. "If you had not come along when you did." "Do not think about that." Yates took a few steps closer, then seemed to catch himself and stopped, as if he was unsure how near he was allowed to approach. "What matters is that you are safe now. You saved my life," Emma insisted. She needed him to understand, needed him to know that she would not forget what he had done. "You could have ridden past. Most people would have. But you stopped and you fought off those bandits and you got me here in time. I owe you everything." Yates looked uncomfortable with her gratitude, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Emma said firmly. "They would not have. But you did. And I want to know your name. Your real name, not just what the doctor called you." "Yates Freeman," he said, and something that might have been a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Though most folks just call me Yates." "Emma Abbott," she replied, even though he probably already knew. "And I do not know how I can ever repay you, Yates Freeman, but I am going to try. There is nothing to repay." Yates finally crossed the remaining distance to her bedside and stood looking down at her with an expression she could not quite read. "I am just glad I was on that trail at the right time. What were you doing up there alone anyway? Those passes are dangerous even without bandits." "My sister," Emma said, and felt a fresh wave of worry. "She is in Silver Plume. She sent word that her husband is sick and she needed help with the children. I was trying to reach her." "Silver Plume is a hard ride from Georgetown," Yates said, "especially alone." "I know, but she needed me." Emma closed her eyes against the tears that threatened. "Now I do not know how long it will be before I can travel, and she is up there managing everything by herself." "How many children does she have?" "3. The youngest is only 18 months old." Yates was quiet for a moment, and when Emma opened her eyes again, she found him watching her with an intensity that made her heart beat faster. "What if I rode to Silver Plume and brought your sister word that you are safe?" he offered. "I could let her know what happened and that you will come as soon as you are able to travel. At least then she would not be worrying." "You would do that?" Emma asked, stunned. "But you do not even know me." "I know you were brave enough to ride those passes alone to help your sister," Yates said. "I know you are scared for her and want her to know you are all right. That is enough." Emma felt tears spill over despite her best efforts to contain them. "You are a good man, Yates Freeman." He looked away, clearly embarrassed. "I will ride out first thing in the morning." "What is your sister's name?" "Sarah. Sarah Carmichael. Her husband is Robert. They have a small ranch just outside of Silver Plume, near the creek. I will find them," Yates promised. He reached out as if to touch her hand, then seemed to think better of it and let his own hand drop back to his side. "You just focus on getting well. Will you come back?" Emma asked before she could stop herself. After you deliver the message, will you come back to Georgetown? Something shifted in Yates's expression, something warm and almost vulnerable. Yes, he said simply. I will come back. Doc Brennan appeared in the doorway then, clearing his throat meaningfully. That is enough excitement for one night. Miss Abbott needs her rest. Yates nodded and backed toward the door, but his eyes never left Emma's face. I will see you soon, he said. Get well, Emma Abbott. After he left, Emma lay in the darkness and listened to the sound of his boots receding down the hallway. Her side ached and her whole body felt weak and shaky. But underneath it all was a warmth that had nothing to do with fever. A stranger had saved her life, and in the process, something had shifted inside her. Something she had not been expecting and did not quite understand. She thought about his steady hands and his kind eyes, about the way he had held her so carefully as he rode for help, about how his voice had cracked when he begged the doctor to hurry. She fell asleep thinking about him and dreamed of hazel eyes and gentle hands. The next 2 days passed in a haze of pain and healing. Doc Brennan proved to be an attentive physician, changing her bandages regularly and feeding her beef broth and water to help rebuild her strength. A kind woman named Mrs. Porter, who lived next door, came to sit with Emma during the day, reading aloud from the newspaper and telling her all the town gossip. Emma learned that Georgetown was a prosperous mining town nestled in the Colorado mountains, that it had been founded in 1859 during the gold rush, and that it now boasted a population of nearly 5,000 people. She learned that Doc Brennan had been practicing medicine here for 15 years, that Mrs. Porter's husband owned the hardware store on Main Street, and that Yates Freeman was a ranch hand who worked for one of the big cattle outfits up in the high country. He is a quiet one, that Yates, Mrs. Porter said on the second afternoon, her knitting needles clicking steadily. Keeps to himself mostly, but folks say he is honest and hardworking. Good with horses too. I heard he broke that roan gelding of his himself, and you will not find a better trained horse in 3 counties. Emma wanted to ask more, wanted to know everything about the man who had saved her, but she was afraid of seeming too interested. Instead, she simply nodded and changed the subject, even though her mind kept returning to Yates and wondering when he would come back. He returned on the 3rd day, just as the afternoon sun was slanting through the window of her room. Emma was sitting up for the first time, propped against pillows and trying to work on a bit of embroidery that Mrs. Porter had brought her. She heard his voice in the outer office, heard Doc Brennan greeting him warmly, and then the door to her room opened and there he was. He looked trail-worn and tired, dust coating his clothes and his dark hair curling damply at his temples as if he had ridden hard to get back. But he smiled when he saw her sitting up, a genuine smile that transformed his whole face. You look better, he said. I feel better, Emma replied, setting aside her embroidery. Did you find my sister? I did. Yates pulled a chair close to her bedside and sat down with a weary sigh. She and her family are well. Her husband is recovering from pneumonia, but he is on the mend. I told her what happened and that you would come visit as soon as you were able. She sent her love and said not to worry about rushing up there. She has a neighbor woman helping with the children. Relief flooded through Emma so intensely that she felt dizzy with it. Thank you. Thank you so much. I have been so worried. She was worried about you too, Yates said gently. But I think I set her mind at ease. She seems like a strong woman. She is managing well. She is strong, Emma agreed. Stronger than me. I doubt that. Yates's eyes were steady on hers. You rode through dangerous country alone to help her. You survived being shot and losing enough blood to kill most people. That takes a particular kind of strength. Emma felt her cheeks warming under his gaze. I was terrified. I am still terrified when I think about those bandits. Being brave does not mean not being scared, Yates said. It means doing what needs to be done even when you are scared. You did that. They talked for nearly an hour, the conversation flowing easily despite the fact that they barely knew each other. Emma learned that Yates had been working as a ranch hand since he was 16, that he had grown up on a small farm in Kansas, that his parents had died of cholera when he was 15 and left him to make his own way in the world. He had drifted west looking for work and had eventually found a place with the Carson Ranch, one of the largest cattle operations in the area. Do you like it? Emma asked. Working on the ranch? Yates considered the question carefully. I like the work. I like being outdoors and working with the animals. The pay is fair and Mr. Carson is a decent man. But it is not what I want to do forever. What do you want to do? Have my own place someday, Yates said, and there was something wistful in his voice. Nothing big, just a small ranch where I can raise horses. I am good with horses, always have been. I think I could make a go of it if I could get enough money together for land and stock. I think you could too, Emma said softly. She found herself imagining it, imagining Yates on his own land with a string of fine horses, and the image made her smile. Doc Brennan interrupted them eventually, shooing Yates out so Emma could rest. But Yates promised to come back the next day, and he kept that promise. He came every day after that, sometimes in the morning before he rode out to the ranch, sometimes in the evening after his work was done. They talked about everything and nothing, their conversations ranging from the serious to the silly, and with each visit Emma felt herself falling a little bit more. It was not just his kindness or his steady presence, though those things certainly mattered. It was the way he listened when she talked, really listened, as if her words were the most important thing in the world. It was the way he made her laugh even when she was in pain, the way he brought her wildflowers from the mountain meadows and books borrowed from the ranch foreman's wife. It was the way he looked at her sometimes, when he thought she was not paying attention, with an expression that made her heart race and her breath catch. 2 weeks after the shooting, Doc Brennan declared Emma well enough to move to the boarding house where she had originally planned to stay. Yates insisted on carrying her there himself, despite her protests that she could walk with assistance. He lifted her as easily as if she weighed nothing, and Emma wrapped her arms around his neck and tried not to think about how right it felt to be held by him. Mrs. Henley, who ran the boarding house, had prepared a room on the ground floor so Emma would not have to navigate stairs. It was small but cheerful, with yellow curtains and a view of the mountains. Yates set Emma down on the bed with infinite care, then stepped back and shoved his hands in his pockets as if he did not trust himself not to reach for her again. "You will be comfortable here," he said. "Yes." Emma smoothed her skirt with nervous hands. "Mrs. Henley seems very kind." "She is." Yates glanced toward the door, then back at her. "Emma, I need to tell you something." Her heart seized. "What is it?" "I am going to be gone for about a week. Mr. Carson is sending a crew up to the high summer pastures to check on the cattle, and he wants me to go along. I leave tomorrow morning." "Oh." Emma tried to hide her disappointment but knew she failed. "Of course. Your work." "I do not want to go," Yates said quietly. "But I cannot say no. This job is all I have right now. I understand." And she did, even though the thought of a week without seeing him felt impossibly long. "You will be careful? Always." He crossed back to her and reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek so lightly it might have been her imagination. "Will you wait for me?" The question hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning that had nothing to do with a week's absence. Emma looked up into his hazel eyes and saw hope there, and uncertainty, and something deeper that made her breath catch. "Yes," she whispered. "I will wait for you." Yates smiled, and it was like watching the sun break through clouds. He leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, his lips warm against her skin. "I will be back before you know it. Get well, Emma Abbott." Then he was gone, and Emma was left alone in the yellow room with her racing heart and the ghost of his kiss still tingling on her skin. The week that followed was the longest of Emma's life. She continued to heal, growing stronger each day, able to walk around her room and even venture out onto the boarding house porch by the fourth day. Mrs. Henley was a pleasant companion, and there were other boarders who stopped to chat and keep her company. But every day felt incomplete without Yates's visits, without his quiet presence and steady voice. She thought about him constantly, thought about the way he had charged in to save her without a moment's hesitation, thought about his gentleness and his strength, about his dreams of having his own ranch and raising horses, thought about the way he looked at her, the way his voice softened when he spoke her name, the way her whole body seemed to come alive when he was near. She had never felt this way before. There had been suitors back in Denver where she had lived before coming to Colorado, young men who had called on her and brought her flowers and made polite conversation in her parents' parlor. She had liked some of them well enough, but she had never felt this pull, this deep certainty that she had found something rare and precious. On the fifth day of Yates's absence, Emma was sitting on the porch when a well-dressed woman approached the boarding house. She was perhaps 40, with auburn hair and a kind face, and she introduced herself as Margaret Carson, wife of the rancher Yates worked for. "I heard about what happened to you," Mrs. Carson said, settling into the chair beside Emma. "What a terrible ordeal. But Yates Freeman is a good man to have on your side in a crisis. My husband says he is one of the most dependable workers we have ever had." "He saved my life," Emma said simply. "He is quite taken with you, you know." Mrs. Carson's eyes twinkled. "He talked of nothing but you for 3 days straight before he left for the high country. Drove the other ranch hands half crazy." Emma felt her cheeks heating. "Did he?" "Oh yes, it is rather sweet, actually. Yates has always been so quiet and self-contained. But you seem to have gotten under his skin in the best possible way." Mrs. Carson patted Emma's hand. "He is a good man, honest and hard-working, a bit rough around the edges perhaps, but with a good heart. If you care for him even a fraction as much as he seems to care for you, I think you would make a fine match." After Mrs. Carson left, Emma sat on the porch for a long time, watching the sun sink behind the mountains and thinking about the future. She had come to Colorado to help her sister, with no plans beyond that. But now she found herself imagining staying in Georgetown, imagining building a life here, imagining building it with Yates. It was crazy, she told herself. She had only known him for 3 weeks. Most of that time she had been injured and recovering. They had never even had a proper courtship, never gone on a walk together or attended a social event or done any of the normal things that courting couples did. How could she possibly be falling in love with him? But her heart knew the truth even if her mind tried to deny it. She was falling in love with Yates Freeman. Maybe she had been falling since the moment he knelt beside her on that mountainside and told her to hold on. Maybe it had happened gradually over the course of all those visits and conversations. Maybe it did not matter when or how it had happened. All that mattered was that it was real. Yates returned on the 8th day, riding into Georgetown covered in trail dust and looking exhausted. Emma was in the parlor of the boarding house when she heard the commotion outside, heard Mrs. Henley exclaim in surprise, and then the door was opening and there he was. He looked thinner, his face shadowed with stubble and his clothes showing the wear of over a week in rough country. But his eyes found hers immediately, and the look on his face made Emma's breath catch. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, and then he was kneeling beside her chair, his hands reaching for hers. "Emma," he said, and his voice was rough. "I am sorry I was gone so long. We ran into trouble with some rustlers, and it took longer than expected to sort everything out. Are you all right? How is your wound?" "I am fine," Emma said, her hands tightening around his. "I am healed. But Yates, you look terrible. When was the last time you ate?" "I do not know. This morning, maybe. It does not matter." He brought her hands to his lips and kissed her knuckles, the gesture so tender it made tears spring to her eyes. All I could think about the whole time was getting back to you, making sure you were all right, seeing you again. I am all right, Emma whispered. I promise. But you need to take care of yourself too. Mrs. Henley appeared with a plate of food and a stern expression. You sit yourself down right here, Mr. Freeman, and eat something before you fall over. Emma is not going anywhere. Yates obeyed, settling into the chair across from Emma and eating the food Mrs. Henley had brought while he told her about his week in the high country, about the cattle they had found, the rustlers they had confronted, the long days in the saddle and the cold nights sleeping on the ground. But his eyes never left Emma's face, and she found herself unable to look away from him either. When he finished eating and Mrs. Henley had taken away the plate, Yates reached across the small table between them and took Emma's hands again. I need to tell you something, he said. I have been thinking about it the whole time I was gone, and I cannot keep it to myself anymore. Emma's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he must be able to hear it. What is it? I am in love with you. The words came out in a rush, as if he had been holding them back for too long and could not contain them anymore. I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other a few weeks. I know I have no right to say it when I am just a ranch hand with nothing to offer you but hard work and dreams. But it is the truth, Emma. I fell in love with you the moment I saw you on that mountainside, and I have been falling deeper every day since. You do not have to say anything back. I just needed you to know. Emma felt tears streaming down her cheeks, but she was smiling through them. You think you have nothing to offer me? Yates, you saved my life. You rode through the night to bring word to my sister. You visited me every day and brought me flowers and made me laugh when I was in pain. You have shown me more kindness and care than anyone ever has. You are brave and gentle and good, and I am in love with you too. The expression on Yates's face was one of pure wonder. You are? Yes. Emma laughed through her tears. I was so miserable while you were gone. Every day felt incomplete without you. I tried to tell myself I was being ridiculous, that I barely knew you, but my heart would not listen. I love you, Yates Freeman. I think I have loved you since you held me and told me to stay with you. Yates stood abruptly, nearly knocking over his chair in his haste. He came around the table and dropped to his knees beside her again, his hands framing her face with infinite tenderness. May I kiss you? Yes, Emma breathed. Please. He kissed her slowly, carefully, as if she were something infinitely precious that might break if he was not gentle enough. His lips were warm and soft against hers, and Emma felt something inside her chest unfurl like a flower opening to the sun. She brought her hands up to rest against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palms, and kissed him back with all the love and longing she had been holding inside for weeks. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. Yates rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. I want to marry you, he whispered. I want to build that ranch I told you about and fill it with horses and with you. I want to wake up every morning and see your face. I want to grow old with you. Tell me that is not crazy. Tell me you want that too. It is not crazy, Emma said, her hands sliding up to tangle in his hair. And yes, I want that too. I want all of it. I want you. They spent the rest of the evening making plans, talking about the future with the kind of eager excitement that only new love can bring. Yates told her about a piece of land he had been looking at, a small valley with good water and grazing that was for sale at a reasonable price. He had been saving his money for years, living frugally and putting aside every spare dollar, and he thought he had almost enough for a down payment. With a little more time, maybe another year of saving, I could buy it, he said. Start building. It would be rough at first. We would have to live in a small cabin while we got established. But it would be ours, Emma. Our land, our home. I have some money too, Emma said. My parents left me a small inheritance when they passed. It is not a fortune, but it is enough to help. We could pool our resources, make it happen sooner. Yates looked uncomfortable. I do not want to take your money. It is not taking if I am giving it freely, Emma pointed out. We are going to be partners, Yates. That means sharing everything. The work, the dreams, the resources. All of it. He studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Partners, he agreed. I like the sound of that. They decided to get married as soon as possible. There was no point in waiting, not when they both knew what they wanted. Yates spoke to the circuit preacher who came through Georgetown once a month, and they set the date for 2 weeks away, enough time for Emma's sister Sarah to travel down from Silver Plume if her husband was well enough for her to leave him. Those 2 weeks flew by in a flurry of preparation. Emma had very few possessions, having left most of her things in Denver when she came to Colorado, but Mrs. Henley and Mrs. Carson and several other women in town rallied around her, helping her put together a simple trousseau and a dress for the wedding. The dress was pale blue calico, nothing fancy, but Emma loved it because Mrs. Carson had embroidered wildflowers around the hem and cuffs, the same kind of wildflowers Yates had brought her when she was recovering. Yates spent his free time looking at the land he wanted to buy and making arrangements with the owner. With Emma's inheritance added to his savings, they had enough not just for the down payment, but to buy the land outright and have money left over for building materials and livestock. The valley Yates had his eye on was beautiful, Emma discovered when he took her to see it. It was about an hour's ride from Georgetown, nestled between forested slopes with a clear stream running through it and meadows full of summer grass. She could see why Yates had fallen in love with it, could imagine a house here, a barn, horses grazing in the meadows. We could call it the Freeman Ranch, Yates said, sitting on his horse beside her and looking out over the valley with obvious longing. Or maybe the Abbott Ranch if you prefer, or something else entirely. I do not care as long as we are building it together. The Freeman Ranch sounds perfect, Emma said. She reached across the space between their horses and took his hand. This is going to be ours, Yates. Our home. Our future. He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it, his eyes never leaving her face. I am the luckiest man alive. Sarah arrived 2 days before the wedding, bringing her 3 children and a wagon full of supplies. She swept Emma into a fierce hug the moment she climbed down from the wagon, tears streaming down her face. I was so scared when that cowboy came and told me you had been shot, Sarah said, holding Emma at arm's length and examining her carefully. I wanted to come down immediately, but Robert was still so ill, and I could not leave the children. Are you truly all right? I am truly all right, Emma assured her. Thanks to Yates. Sarah, I want you to meet him. He is the one who saved me. Yates had been hanging back, clearly not wanting to intrude on the sisters' reunion, but now he stepped forward and removed his hat politely. Sarah looked him up and down with a critical eye, and Emma held her breath, suddenly desperate for her sister's approval. Finally, Sarah smiled. So you are the man who saved my little sister and then swept her off her feet. I am glad to meet you properly, Yates Freeman, and I am grateful to you for bringing Emma back to me. The pleasure is mine, madam, Yates said. Emma has told me a lot about you. All good things, I hope. Sarah turned back to Emma with a knowing look. You really love him, do you not? I can see it all over your face. I really do, Emma admitted. I know it seems fast, but Sarah, he is everything. He is good and kind, and he makes me so happy. I cannot imagine my life without him now. Then that is all that matters, Sarah said firmly. She linked her arm through Emma's and started walking toward the boarding house. Now, let us go inside and you can tell me all about your wedding plans. I want to hear every detail. The wedding took place on a bright Saturday morning in late August of 1877. The The ceremony was held in Georgetown's small church, with most of the town in attendance. Emma wore her blue calico dress with the embroidered wildflowers, and Yates wore his Sunday best, his dark hair neatly combed and his face clean-shaven. When Emma walked down the aisle on Sarah's arm, she saw the way Yates's eyes lit up and knew she must look as happy as she felt. The ceremony itself was simple and brief. They spoke their vows in front of God and the community, promising to love and honor each other for the rest of their lives. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife and told Yates he could kiss his bride, Yates cupped Emma's face in his hands and kissed her with such tenderness that several women in the congregation sighed audibly. The reception was held at the Carson Ranch, with tables set up in the yard and enough food to feed half the county. There was music and dancing, and Emma found herself passed from partner to partner as various townspeople claimed dances. But she kept finding her way back to Yates, drawn to him like a compass needle to north. As the sun set and the party began to wind down, Yates leaned close and whispered, "Are you ready to go home, Mrs. Freeman?" Mrs. Freeman. Emma loved the sound of it. "Yes," she said. "Take me home." Home, for now, was a small cabin that Yates had been renting just outside of town. It was temporary, just until they could build their house on the land they had purchased, but Emma did not care. It could have been a tent and she would have been happy, as long as Yates was there with her. He carried her over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down gently in the main room. Someone, probably Mrs. Carson, had been here earlier and tidied up, leaving fresh flowers on the table and the oil lamps lit. The cabin was small but cozy, just 2 rooms and a loft, but it felt like a palace to Emma because it was theirs. Yates closed the door and turned to face her, his expression suddenly serious. "Emma," he said softly, "I want you to know that I will spend the rest of my life trying to make you happy. I will work hard and be faithful and love you with everything I have. You gave me a future when I thought all I had were dreams. You gave me hope. You gave me everything." Emma crossed to him and wrapped her arms around his neck, rising up on her toes to kiss him. "You gave me everything too," she whispered against his lips. "You saved my life in more ways than one. I love you, Yates Freeman, now and always." He kissed her deeply, and Emma melted into him, feeling the strength in his arms as they came around her, feeling the beat of his heart against hers. When he lifted her in his arms and carried her to the bedroom, she went willingly, joyfully, ready to begin this new chapter of their life together. The next months passed in a blur of work and happiness. Yates continued working at the Carson Ranch, saving additional money for building supplies, while Emma kept house and began planning their future home. On his days off, they rode out to their valley and began the hard work of building. They started with a barn, knowing they would need shelter for the horses before they could start acquiring stock. Yates did most of the heavy construction himself, but Emma helped where she could, handing him tools and holding boards steady while he nailed them in place. Other neighbors pitched in too, as was the custom in ranch country. The Carsons came, and some of the other ranch hands, and several families from Georgetown who had become friends. Barn raisings turned into social events, with the women bringing food and the men working together to lift the heavy beams into place. By October, they had a solid barn with stalls for a dozen horses and a loft for hay storage. The house came next. It would be small, just 4 rooms to start, but Yates designed it with the future in mind, building it so they could add on later as they needed more space. Emma loved watching him work, loved seeing the careful way he measured and cut each board, the skill with which he fitted the pieces together. He was building their future with his own 2 hands, and she found it impossibly romantic. They moved into the house on a cold November day, even though it was not quite finished. The walls were up and the roof was on, and that was enough for now. They could do the finish work over the winter. Emma hung curtains and arranged their few pieces of furniture, making the raw space feel like home. That night they sat by the fire in their new parlor, wrapped in blankets and watching the flames dance, and Emma thought she had never been happier. "Are you warm enough?" Yates asked, pulling her closer against his side. "I am perfect," Emma said. "This is perfect. I cannot believe this is our home." "I keep having to remind myself too," Yates admitted. "Sometimes I think I am going to wake up and find out it was all a dream, that I am still just a ranch hand with nothing but hopes and plans." "It is not a dream," Emma said firmly. She took his hand and placed it over her stomach, where she had been feeling the first flutters of movement for the past week. "And I have news that will prove it. We are going to have a baby, Yates. You are going to be a father." For a moment Yates just stared at her, his expression frozen in shock. Then his face broke into the biggest smile she had ever seen. "A baby?" he repeated. "Are you sure?" "I am sure. I have suspected for a few weeks, but now I know. The baby should come sometime in early May." Yates let out a whoop of joy and pulled her into his arms, kissing her face all over while Emma laughed. "We are having a baby," he said in wonder. "Emma, we are having a baby. I am going to be a father." "You are going to be a wonderful father," Emma said, cupping his face in her hands. "Our child is so lucky to have you." "I am the lucky one," Yates said. "I cannot believe how much my life has changed. A year ago I had nothing. Now I have a wife I love more than life itself, a ranch of my own, and a baby on the way. How did I get so blessed?" "Maybe it was meant to be," Emma suggested. "Maybe I was meant to get shot on that mountain pass so you could save me and we could fall in love." "Do not say that," Yates said, turning serious. "I still have nightmares about finding you bleeding in the dirt. I still wake up sometimes in a cold sweat, remembering how I thought you were going to die." "But I did not die," Emma reminded him gently. "I lived because of you, and now we have this beautiful life together. So maybe it was worth it. Maybe all the pain and fear were worth it to get us here." Yates gathered her close and rested his chin on top of her head. "I love you so much it scares me sometimes," he admitted. "I look at you and think about how close I came to losing you before I even knew you, and it makes my chest tight. I do not ever want to be without you, Emma." "You will not be," Emma promised. "We have a lifetime ahead of us. A lifetime of love and work and building this ranch together. Of raising our children and growing old together. I am not going anywhere." Winter settled over the valley, bringing snow and cold temperatures. Yates finished the interior of their house, installing a proper kitchen and ensuring all the cracks were sealed against drafts. Emma sewed curtains and quilts, preparing for the baby's arrival. They acquired their first horses in December, 3 good mares and a promising young stallion that Yates planned to use as the foundation of his breeding program. "These are going to be the best horses in Colorado," Yates said, watching the animals settle into their new home in the barn. "I can feel it. Another few years and people are going to be coming from all over to buy Freeman Ranch horses." "I believe it," Emma said. She was standing beside him bundled in a heavy coat, her pregnancy just starting to show beneath the layers. "You have a gift with horses, Yates. I have seen the way you work with them. They trust you." "Horses are honest," Yates said. "You treat them with respect and patience, and they will give you everything they have. I like that. No games, no hidden agendas. Just honest work and honest partnership." "Like us," Emma said with a smile. "Like us," Yates agreed, pulling her close and kissing the top of her head. "Come on. Let us get you back inside before you catch a chill. I do not want you or the baby getting sick." Christmas that year was simple but joyful. Sarah and her family came down from Silver Plume for a visit, and the house was full of noise and laughter as the children ran around and the adults visited. Yates gave Emma a beautiful music box he had ordered from Denver, and she gave him a new saddle she had been secretly commissioning from the town saddler. They roasted a goose and sang carols, And Emma thought about how different this Christmas was from the previous year, when she had been alone in Denver, mourning her parents and trying to figure out what to do with her life. "You look happy," Sarah observed one evening when the men had taken the children outside to see the horses and the sisters were alone in the kitchen. "I am happy," Emma said. "Happier than I ever thought I could be. Is that strange? To find this kind of joy from something that started with so much fear and pain." "Not strange at all," Sarah said. "Sometimes the best things in life come from the hardest moments. You found a good man, Emma. Hold on to him." "I plan to," Emma said, "for the rest of my life." The baby arrived on a warm May morning in 1878, after a long night of labor that left Emma exhausted but triumphant. Yates had ridden for the midwife as soon as Emma's pain started, and he had stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand and whispering encouragement even when she crushed his fingers with her grip. When the midwife finally placed the baby in Emma's arms and announced that she had a healthy son, Emma looked down at the tiny red face and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. The baby had dark hair like Yates and a strong, healthy cry that filled the room. "A son," Yates breathed, looking at the baby with an expression of awe. "We have a son, Emma." "We do," Emma said, tears streaming down her face. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names for months but had not settled on anything definite. Now, looking at their son, Yates said, "What about James?" "After your father." Emma's father had died 3 years earlier, and she still missed him terribly. The thought of honoring his memory by naming their son after him made her throat tight with emotion. "James Freeman," she said softly. "It is perfect." Little James was a good baby, healthy and strong. He nursed well and slept reasonably, and Emma marveled at the way Yates took to fatherhood as if he had been born for it. He would spend hours just holding the baby, walking him around the house and telling him about the ranch and the horses. When James fussed, Yates would sing to him in a low, rumbling voice that never failed to soothe him. "You are a natural," Emma told him one evening, watching as Yates rocked James to sleep. "I never thought I would get to have this," Yates admitted quietly. "A family, a home. I spent so many years just drifting, working for other people's dreams, thinking this kind of life was not for someone like me. And now I have it, and I keep waiting for someone to tell me it was all a mistake." "It is not a mistake," Emma said firmly. "You deserve this, Yates. You deserve all the happiness in the world. And you are giving James and me a wonderful life. Never doubt that." The ranch continued to grow. By the time James was a year old, they had a dozen horses and were starting to get a reputation for quality stock. Ranchers from neighboring counties began coming to look at Yates's horses, and more than a few left with a purchase. The money was modest but steady, enough to live on and to continue improving the ranch. When James was 2, Emma discovered she was pregnant again. This time she was not nervous about telling Yates, knowing how much he had loved becoming a father. His reaction did not disappoint. He swept her up in his arms and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. Their second child, a daughter they named Grace, arrived in the spring of 1881. She had Emma's coloring, with light brown hair and blue eyes, and from the moment she was born she had Yates wrapped around her tiny finger. He doted on her shamelessly, carrying her everywhere and refusing to let her cry for even a moment if he could help it. "You are spoiling her," Emma said with amusement, watching as Yates fed Grace her bottle with infinite patience. "She is my little girl," Yates said without a trace of apology. "I am allowed to spoil her." Emma just shook her head and smiled. She loved watching Yates with their children, loved seeing the gentle way he handled them and the obvious adoration in his eyes. He was the father she had always hoped her children would have, patient and loving and endlessly devoted. The years passed in a blur of hard work and happiness. The ranch prospered, growing until they had nearly 40 horses, and were known throughout Colorado for their quality breeding stock. They added on to the house, building a second story with more bedrooms and expanding the kitchen. They hired a ranch hand to help with the work, a young man named Tom who reminded Emma a little of how Yates had been when she first met him, quiet and hardworking with dreams of his own ranch someday. In 1884, Emma gave birth to their third child, another boy they named Samuel. He was a serious baby, watching the world with solemn eyes, and he seemed most content when he was outside watching his father work with the horses. "That one is going to be a horseman like his father," the midwife predicted, and she was right. As soon as Samuel could walk, he was following Yates around the barn, mimicking everything his father did. Life was not without its challenges. There were hard winters when they lost livestock to cold or disease. There were droughts that made grazing scarce and forced them to buy expensive feed. There were accidents and illnesses, moments of fear when one of the children would get sick or Yates would be injured working with a difficult horse. But they weathered it all together, their love and partnership only growing stronger with each challenge they overcame. On a warm summer evening in 1887, nearly 10 years after they had first met, Emma and Yates sat on the porch of their house and watched their children play in the yard. James, now 9, was teaching 5-year-old Grace how to rope a fence post, while 3-year-old Samuel toddled around trying to imitate them. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the valley was filled with the peaceful sounds of evening. "Do you ever think about that day on the mountain?" Emma asked quietly. "The day you found me?" "All the time," Yates admitted. He reached over and took her hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. "I think about how different my life would be if I had not been on that trail at that exact moment. If I had left the Carson Ranch 10 minutes earlier or later. If I had taken a different route. We would never have met, and I would still be alone, still just dreaming about a life like this instead of living it." "I think about it too," Emma said. "About how close I came to dying, about how scared I was. But then I think about how you saved me, and how everything that has happened since has been because of that moment. Our marriage, our children, this ranch. All of it started because you were there when I needed you most." "I will always be there when you need me," Yates said. "That is my promise to you. For the rest of our lives, Emma, I will be there." "I know you will," Emma said. She leaned her head on his shoulder and watched their children laugh and play, watched the sunset paint their valley in gold, and felt contentment settle over her like a warm blanket. "We have built a good life, you and I." "The best life," Yates agreed. He kissed the top of her head, his arm coming around her shoulders. "I love you, Emma Freeman. Thank you for waiting for me that day when Doc said you were fading. Thank you for fighting to live. Thank you for saying yes to this crazy life with me." "There is nowhere else I would rather be," Emma said. "No one else I would rather be with. You are my home, Yates. You always will be." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky and their children's laughter rang out across the valley, Emma thought about all the years that had brought them to this moment. She thought about pain and fear transformed into love and joy. She thought about how sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us to the best things. And she thought about how grateful she was for a cowboy who had not ridden past when he saw someone in trouble, who had instead risked his life to save hers, and in doing so had saved them both. The years continued to unfold with the steady rhythm of ranch life. By 1890, the Freeman Ranch was one of the most respected horse breeding operations in Colorado. James, now 12, was already showing his father's gift with horses, able to gentle even the most skittish animals with patience and kindness. Grace, at 8, preferred helping her mother in the house and garden, though she could ride as well as any of them when she wanted to. And Samuel, at 6, was happiest when he was outside, whether working with the horses or exploring the valley. Emma gave birth to their fourth and final child in the spring of 1891, another daughter they named Rose. At 33, Emma had told Yates that this would be their last baby, and he had agreed. For children seemed like exactly the right number for their family, enough to fill the house with noise and love without overwhelming them. Rose was a happy baby, quick to smile and laugh, and she completed their family in a way Emma had not known was missing. Yates, now 35, still worked the ranch with the same dedication he had shown from the beginning, though he now had 3 ranch hands helping him and could afford to take the occasional day off to spend with his family. On Sunday afternoons, weather permitting, they would load the children into the wagon and drive into Georgetown for church and socializing. The town had continued to grow over the years, and Emma had made many friends among the other ranch wives and townspeople. She enjoyed these visits, enjoyed the chance to dress up and visit and feel connected to the wider community. But she always loved the ride back home even more, loved watching their valley come into view as they crested the last hill, loved seeing their house and barn solid and real in the fading light. This was where she belonged, she thought. This ranch, this family, this life she and Yates had built together from nothing but love and determination. In 1895, when Emma was 37 and Yates was 39, they hosted a celebration for the ranch's 20th anniversary. They had purchased the land in 1877, the same year they married, and they wanted to mark the milestone with friends and family. Sarah and her family came down from Silver Plume, older now but still vibrant. The Carsons came, both of them white-haired but still running their ranch with competence. Former ranch hands and their families, neighbors from surrounding spreads, and friends from Georgetown all gathered in the yard. 20 years, Mrs. Carson said to Emma as they stood together watching the festivities. It does not seem possible that so much time has passed. I still remember Yates coming to work for us, just a quiet young man with big dreams. And now look at what he has built. What we have built, Emma corrected gently. He could not have done it without me, and I could not have done it without him. We are partners in everything. That is the secret, is it not? Mrs. Carson said with a knowing smile. A good partnership. That is what makes a marriage last and a ranch thrive. You and Yates have both. As if summoned by the mention of his name, Yates appeared at Emma's side, slipping his arm around her waist. He had a bit more gray at his temples now, and his face showed the weathering of years spent outdoors. But to Emma he was just as handsome as the day he had saved her life on that mountain pass. What are you two conspiring about? He asked with amusement. Just talking about how far you have come, Mrs. Carson said. Your parents would be proud, Yates. This ranch, your family. You have built something lasting. Yates's expression turned serious, and he pulled Emma a little closer. I would have nothing if Emma had not survived that day. This ranch, our children, everything good in my life came from the moment I found her on that mountain trail. She is the reason for all of it. We are the reason for all of it, Emma insisted, echoing what she had said to Mrs. Carson. Together, Yates agreed, and he kissed her right there in front of everyone, not caring who saw. After 20 years of marriage, he still kissed her like he had on their wedding day, with tenderness and passion and deep, abiding love. As their children grew, the dynamics of the ranch shifted. James, at 17 in 1896, was doing most of the hands-on work with the horses now, with Yates supervising and handling the business side of things. Grace, at 13, had discovered a talent for bookkeeping and helped her mother manage the ranch accounts. Samuel, at 11, worked alongside his older brother, and 7-year-old Rose was just starting to take an interest in the horses. We are raising the next generation of the Freeman Ranch, Yates said to Emma one evening as they sat on the porch, their traditional spot for watching the sunset. Another 10 years and James will probably be running this place. And you will finally be able to slow down a little, Emma said. Maybe take some time to relax and enjoy what we have built. I am already enjoying it, Yates said. Every day I wake up in this house with you beside me. Every day I get to work with good horses and watch our children grow. That is enjoyment. I do not need anything else. Emma leaned against his shoulder, content. They had been through so much together over the years, had weathered storms both literal and figurative, and had come through it all with their love intact. She thought about the frightened young woman who had been shot on a mountain pass 20 years ago, who had thought she was going to die alone in the dirt. That woman could never have imagined the life Emma was living now, could never have dreamed that so much happiness was possible. Do you ever wish things had been different? Emma asked. That we had met some other way, without all the fear and pain? Yates considered the question carefully, as he always did. No, he said finally, because then we would not be who we are. That day shaped us both. It taught me that every moment matters, that you have to grab onto the good things when you find them because life can change in an instant. It taught you that you are stronger than you knew. We became who we are because of what we went through, and I would not change that even if I could. I love you, Emma said, the words as true now as they had been 20 years ago. I will love you until the day I die and beyond. And I love you, Yates replied. You are my everything, Emma Freeman. You always have been. The turn of the century came, bringing with it new challenges and opportunities. The automobile was starting to make appearances even in rural Colorado, though horses were still the primary mode of transportation. The Freeman Ranch continued to thrive, now run primarily by James with his father's guidance. In 1902, James married a sweet young woman named Catherine from Georgetown, and they began talking about building a house on the ranch property. We are going to be grandparents, Emma said to Yates with wonder when Catherine shared that she was expecting. Can you believe it? I can barely believe I am old enough to have a grown son, much less grandchildren, Yates said, but he was grinning. Time moves fast. Their first grandchild, a boy named Thomas, was born in early 1903. He was followed 2 years later by a little girl named Elizabeth. Grace married in 1904, choosing a young lawyer from Georgetown, and moved into town though she visited the ranch frequently. Samuel showed no interest in marriage yet, preferring to focus on his work with the horses, and Rose at 12 was still very much a child. Emma was 50 in 1908, and Yates was 52. They had been married for 31 years, and Emma thought Yates was even more handsome now than he had been as a young man. The gray in his hair suited him, and the lines around his eyes spoke of years spent laughing and living and loving. He was still strong despite his age, still worked alongside their sons every day, and Emma knew he would probably never fully retire. On a summer evening much like the one when Emma had asked Yates if he ever thought about the day they met, they sat on their porch and watched their grandchildren play in the yard while James and Catherine looked on. Samuel was working with a horse in the corral, and Rose was reading on the porch steps. The sun was setting in its familiar glory, and Emma felt the same contentment she had felt so many times before. Do you remember what you said to Doc Brennan that day? Emma asked suddenly. When you carried me into his office? Yates looked at her, his eyes warm in the fading light. I said a lot of things. You said, hurry, she is fading, Emma recalled. I heard you, even though I was barely conscious. And I remember thinking that I did not want to fade, that I wanted to live. I think I held on because I heard the fear in your voice and I knew someone cared whether I lived or died. I cared before I even knew you, Yates said. And then I knew you and I cared more than I thought it was possible to care. You did not fade, Emma. You have been the brightest light in my life for 31 years. And you have been mine, Emma said. She reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining in that familiar way. I think about all the things that had to go right for us to find each other. You had to be on that trail at exactly the right time. Those bandits had to attack when they did. I had to survive the ride to Georgetown. Doc Brennan had to be able to save me. Any one of those things could have gone differently, and we would never have had this life. But they did not go differently, Yates pointed out. They went exactly the way they were supposed to. We found each other, and we built this life together, and I would not trade a single moment of it. Not even the hard times, Emma asked. The droughts and the sicknesses and the struggles? Not even those, Yates said firmly. Because we went through them together, and they made us stronger. They made us who we are. As the stars began to appear and their families settled in for the evening, Emma thought about legacy. She and Yates would not live forever, though she hoped they had many good years left. But when they were gone, this ranch would remain. Their children and grandchildren would continue the work they had started. The Freeman name would endure, and with it the story of a cowboy who saved a dying woman and fell in love, who built a life and a legacy from nothing but determination and love. The years continued their steady march. More grandchildren arrived, and the ranch continued to prosper under James's management with Yates's guidance. In 1915, when Emma was 57 and Yates was 59, they celebrated their 38th wedding anniversary with a quiet dinner, just the two of them. 38 years, Emma marveled. We have been married more than half my life. And every year has been a gift, Yates said. He reached across the table and took her hand. I meant what I said when we got married. I would spend my life trying to make you happy. I hope I have succeeded. You have, Emma assured him. You have made me happier than I ever dreamed possible. When I was lying in that dirt, bleeding and thinking I was going to die, I could not have imagined that so much joy was waiting for me. That I would meet you and fall in love and have this beautiful family and this wonderful life. You gave me all of it. We gave it to each other, Yates corrected gently. That is how partnerships work. As they grew older, they began to slow down, though neither of them ever fully retired. Yates still consulted on the horse breeding program and helped with the more difficult animals. Emma still managed the household and helped Catherine with the grandchildren. They took walks together in the evenings, moving more slowly than they once had but still hand in hand, still devoted to each other after all these years. In 1920, they celebrated their 43rd anniversary and the ranch's 43rd year of operation. The celebration was smaller than the one they had hosted 25 years earlier, but it was no less meaningful. All 4 of their children were there with their families, along with grandchildren ranging in age from infant to teenager. The yard was full of life and laughter, and Emma and Yates sat together and watched it all with satisfaction. We did good, Yates said quietly, his arm around Emma's shoulders. We did better than good, Emma replied. We did amazing. Look at what we created. Not just this ranch, but this family. These people would not exist if you had not saved me that day. Then I guess getting shot was the best thing that ever happened to you, Yates said with a teasing smile. Emma laughed and swatted his arm. That is not what I meant, and you know it. But I suppose in a strange way you are right. Everything good in my life came from that terrible moment. I found you, and you were worth every moment of pain and fear. And you were worth the gray hair you have given me over the years, Yates replied, still smiling. All the times you climbed on a horse when you probably should not have, all the times you worked too hard or worried too much. You have kept me on my toes. Someone had to, Emma said. You needed a partner who would challenge you, not just go along with everything you said. I needed you, Yates said simply. I have always needed you. They sat together as the sun set once again over their valley, over the land they had claimed and the life they had built. Emma thought about all the sunsets they had watched together, all the years that had brought them from that desperate moment on the mountain to this peaceful evening surrounded by family. She thought about love and partnership, about how 2 people could take nothing and turn it into everything, about how a moment of crisis could transform into a lifetime of joy. I would do it all again, Emma said suddenly. If I could go back knowing everything I know now, I would make all the same choices. I would ride that mountain pass alone. I would take that bullet. Because it brought me to you. Please never take another bullet, Yates said, but his voice was warm with emotion. I do not think my heart could take it again. I will do my best, Emma promised. She leaned her head on his shoulder and closed her eyes, content. I love you, Yates Freeman, more today than yesterday, and more tomorrow than today. And I love you, Emma Freeman, Yates replied, to the end of my days and beyond. As the years passed into the 1920s, Emma and Yates settled into a comfortable routine. They were in their 60s now, officially elderly though neither of them felt it. They still took their evening walks when the weather permitted, still sat on the porch and watched the sunset, still held hands and talked about everything and nothing. The ranch was fully in James's hands now, with Samuel as his right-hand man, and Emma and Yates found themselves with more leisure time than they had ever had before. They used that time to travel a bit, visiting Sarah in Silver Plume and taking a trip to Denver to see how much the city had changed since Emma had lived there. They spent time with their grandchildren, passing on stories and wisdom, and they simply enjoyed being together, savoring every moment they had left. In 1925, on a warm spring day, much like the one when they had first purchased their land, Emma and Yates stood together looking out over their valley. James and Catherine's house was visible to the east, and the original house where Emma and Yates still lived stood solid and weathered to the west. The barn had been expanded twice over the years, and new outbuildings had been added. Horses grazed in the meadows, and the sound of children's laughter drifted on the breeze. 48 years, Yates said quietly. We have been at this for 48 years. And it has been a good 48 years, Emma replied. She was 70 now, her hair completely gray and her movements slower than they once had been. But she still had the same spirit, the same determination that had kept her alive on that mountain pass so long ago. No regrets. None, Yates agreed. He was 72. His face deeply lined and his hands showing the wear of decades of hard work. But his eyes were still the same hazel she remembered from that first desperate meeting, still warm and kind and full of love when he looked at her. Emma, I need to tell you something. What is it? She asked, turning to face him fully. I have been thinking about that day a lot lately, Yates admitted. The day I found you. And I keep coming back to the same thought. What if I had not been there? What if I had been somewhere else doing something else? You would have died, and I would never have known you existed. I would have lived my whole life never knowing what I was missing. But you were there, Emma said firmly. You did find me. We did build this life together. That is what matters. I know, but it makes me grateful in a way I cannot quite express. Grateful for every single day we have had together. Grateful that I got to love you and be loved by you. Grateful that we created this family and this ranch and this legacy. When I think about dying, I am not afraid, because I know I will have lived a full life. I will have loved completely and been loved in return. There is nothing more a man can ask for. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. Are you feeling all right? You are not sick, are you? No, Yates assured her quickly. I am fine. Just getting philosophical in my old age, I suppose. I just wanted you to know how grateful I am. How much every day with you has meant to me. And every day with you has meant everything to me, Emma said. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, and he held her close the way he had held her that day on the mountain, protective and tender. We have been so lucky, you and I. The luckiest, Yates agreed. They stood there together in the sunlight, two people who had found each other in the worst of circumstances and had built something beautiful from the ashes of fear and pain. Around them, the Freeman Ranch thrived, a testament to what love and partnership could accomplish. Their children and grandchildren carried on their legacy, and somewhere in the future, great-grandchildren they would never meet would benefit from the foundation Emma and Yates had laid. As they walked slowly back to the house, hand in hand as they had been for nearly 50 years, Emma thought about the story they would leave behind. The story of a cowboy who saved a woman bleeding in the dirt, who carried her to safety and then gave her his heart. The story of how that woman fell in love with her rescuer and how together they built an empire from nothing. The story of a love that endured through decades of hardship and triumph, through 4 children and countless grandchildren, through all the joys and sorrows that life could bring. It was a good story, Emma thought. A true story. A love story for the ages. And she was grateful beyond measure that she had lived to tell it. That Yates had been there when she needed him most. That he had not let her fade away into nothing. Instead, he had pulled her back from the brink and given her a reason to fight. A reason to live. And what a life it had been. The Freeman Ranch continued to thrive for many more years, passed down through generations who carried Emma and Yates's legacy forward. But the heart of it all remained that single moment on a Colorado mountain pass, when a cowboy saw a woman in trouble and did not ride past, when he risked his life to save hers and in doing so saved them both. That moment of courage and compassion rippled forward through time, creating waves of love and family and prosperity that would last long after both Emma and Yates were gone. Years later, on a peaceful evening in 1932, Emma Abbott Freeman passed away quietly in her sleep at the age of 74, surrounded by family. Yates held her hand until the very end, whispering his love to her one final time. He followed her less than a year later, at 76, his heart simply giving out as if it could not bear to beat without her. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking their valley, beneath twin headstones that bore their names and a simple inscription. Together in life, together in death, together forever. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren continued to work the Freeman Ranch, continuing to breed the finest horses in Colorado just as Yates had dreamed. And sometimes, on summer evenings when the sun set golden over the mountains, the family would gather on the porch of the original house and tell the story of how it all began. They would tell about a woman who was shot on a mountain pass and left to die, about a cowboy who saved her and then won her heart, about how love and determination could build something lasting from the ashes of tragedy. It was a story worth telling, a legacy worth preserving, and at its heart was a simple truth that had sustained Emma and Yates through nearly 50 years of marriage. That sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us to the best things, that love can flourish even in the darkest circumstances, and that 2 people who commit to building a life together can accomplish anything they set their minds to. The Freeman Ranch stood as a monument to that truth, and Emma and Yates's love story became the foundation upon which generations of their family built their own lives and loves. The ranch thrived well into the modern era, eventually growing to encompass thousands of acres and becoming one of the most respected horse breeding operations in the American West. But no matter how much it grew or changed, the heart of it remained the same. A small valley, a simple house, and the memory of 2 people who loved each other completely and built something beautiful together. And so the story ended where it began, with a cowboy and a woman and a moment of crisis that transformed into a lifetime of love. From blood and fear and desperation came joy and family and prosperity. From a single act of courage came generations of legacy. And from the moment when Yates Freeman carried Emma Abbott into Doc Brennan's office and pleaded for him to hurry because she was fading, came a love story that would be told and retold for 100 years, inspiring everyone who heard it to believe in the power of love, the importance of courage, and the truth that sometimes the best things in life come from the hardest moments. Emma did not fade that day. She lived. She thrived. She loved and was loved in return. And in the end, that made all the difference.